How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Welcome back to Fine Tooning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. It is me, entertainment writer Jim Hill, doing yet another solo show this week. Apologies, folks, but I neglected to check Mr. Taylor's travel schedule, and it would appear that as soon as Drew got back from London, where he was covering the world premiere of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, just a reminder, folks, that Paramount Pictures release opens in theater this coming Friday, May 23rd, where Mission Impossible 8 then goes head-to-head at least in North American theaters, with Disney's live-action reimagining of Lilo and Stitch, which is why exhibitors are hoping for some truly crazy domestic box office numbers a week from today, when we'll be then wrapping up the long Memorial Day weekend. Anyway, again, as I mentioned, I neglected to check Drew's travel schedule, which is why I'm recording this show solo. You see, even as I speak, Mr. Taylor is down in Florida with Len Testa, my co-host on the Disney Dish podcast, where these two gentlemen are hanging out as invited guests of the Universal Orlando Resort. They're both there to cover the grand opening of Epic Universe, whereas I'm home scooping cat poop. Just to be clear here, I too was invited to the grand opening of Epic Universal, but seeing as the media event was scheduled to run May 19th to the 22nd, the actual day that Universal Orlando likes to go, of what Universal Orlando likes to call its fourth theme park. That's when Epic Universal will officially be opening to the day, but let's be clear here, okay? Volcano Bay is a water park, not a water theme park. And to quote what Regina told Gretchen in Mean Girls, stop trying to make fetch happen. Again, Universal, I mean, how many times, no matter how many times you tell people that Volcano Bay is a water theme park, visitors are not going to call that thing that. So just pull down all the water theme park signs and put them wherever you're about to store all of that tapu stuff you're about to get rid of. Anyway, I was invited to Epic Universe media event, but given my lovely bride Nancy is having hip replacement surgery on May 20th, being down in Florida, May 19th and 22nd was a no-go, so that's why I arranged for Mr. Testa to go in my place. And long story short, Drew and Len will have many stories to share next week once they both get back from this event in Orlando. But as for this week's Fine Tuning, again, another solo show, just me jabbering. I hope you're okay with that. All right. If not, and you really miss Drew's voice, there is, of course, Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast that Mr. Taylor does with his equally talented co-host, Charles Hood. So if you have a hankering to hear Drew's dulcet tones, head on over there. Anyway, we got a lot of animation news to discuss this week, but before we do that, I have to acknowledge this podcast sponsor, which is the DVC store. And if you're already planning your next trip to Walt Disney World, you can save some serious scratch by renting DVC points at the DVC rental store. Imagine staying at a deluxe resort for a fraction of the cost. Total game changer. And heads up, folks, the DVC rental store is currently running a limited time promotion where they're now offering the lowest prices of the year. So please check them out at dvcrentalstore.com. Oh, and if you already own or are thinking of joining the Disney Vacation Club, be sure and check out the DVC resale market. They're the leader in the secondary market with over 70,000 satisfied members. So whether you're looking to buy or sell your DVC points, they make the process seamless. Okay, so over the past few weeks, we've been talking quite a bit about The King of Kings, which is that animated version of Charles Dickens' The Life of Our Lord. This Mofax Studio production, made in South Korea, showed surprising strength at the North American box office. It started on 3,200 screens in this region a week before Easter, and by the time King of Kings ended its 5-week run in theaters, it was down to just 1,089 screens domestically, but still managed to sell 65 million worth of tickets worldwide. Now, I am not saying that these two events are connected. But I have to admit, I still find it intriguing that on the heels of a faith-based animated film doing this well at the domestic box office, we just learned that Butch Hartman, the creator of The Fairly OddParents and Danny Phantom, has launched an independent animation studio that will then focus on creating original faith-based programming for the kids and family audience. And according to Hartman, the stories and shows that this new animation studio will create will be curated with families in mind. We're working with some of the best animators in the business, many of whom I've worked with on other shows, to offer an enriching experience suitable for children of all ages. And among the projects that Hartman currently has in development at this new animation studio is a series called Little Harps, which is where a guardian angel school helps to prepare new recruits to help kids down on Earth, which I gotta say sounds very much in the Cosmo and Wanda wheelhouse, at least to me. Anyway, best of luck to Butch on his new project. Always love to hear about new places that then give friends who work as animators or story artists additional opportunities for employment. One request, though: if the team at Hartman's new studio ever tackles a project that involves Pontius Pilate, well, I would love it if Carlos Alazarcari got a shot at auditioning for that role. I've always loved Carlos's work on The Fairly OddParents. His crazed performance as Mr. Crocker always brought a great energy to that animated series. By the way, worth noting here that King of Kings or Little Harps, again, that show that Bruce Hartman's independent animation studio now has in the works, is not the first faith-based cartoon series. That distinction has to be awarded to Davy and Goliath, the clay animated series from Art Clokey that debuted back in February of 1961. Now, that show, which ran for 5 seasons back in the 1960s, was first produced by the United Lutheran Church of America, later just the Lutheran Church of America, not sure what happened to the United part of that name. Anyway, my daughter Alice recommended this great book she discovered, Gumby Imagined, the story of Art Clokey and his creations. This coffee table book was published back in November of 2017 by Dynamite Entertainment. It was written by Art Clokey's son Joe and Joe's wife Joan Rock Clokey. And Gumby Imagined has all sorts of great behind-the-scenes photos when it comes to the production of Art Clokey's first animated series, Gumby. Speaking of which, 2025 marks the 70th anniversary of Gumby. This animated series of shorts debuted, well, as a one-off on the Howdy Doody show back in 1955, but that short got such a strong reaction that NBC executives insisted that Clokey immediately start work on a sequel short. And when that second short featuring Gumby got an equally strong reaction from Howdy Doody viewers, NBC, well, they first signed Art to a 7-year contract and then ordered a Gumby TV series. Now, production of Davy and Goliath, that started up at Clokey Productions as their initial contract at NBC was winding down. And again, that was for just the first series of Gumby shows. There have been multiple revivals since, including one that was announced by Bento Box back in June of last year, 2024. Gumby and Gumby Kids won't be done using clay animation, but rather hand-drawn animation. And this project was announced at the Annecy International Animation Film Festival last year and is reportedly aimed at an audience of 8 to 12-year-olds. Now, there is no word on a Davy and Goliath revival. I mean, that said, we did get Merle Oral back in the 2000s, which was clearly a parody of that Art Clokey series, even going so far as to give the characters on that TV show names that then riffed on the clay animation production process, like Coach Stop Frame, Reverend Putty, and Nurse Bendy. Speaking of books, The Art of Disney Pixar's Elio hit store shelves just this past week, and per usual, the folks at Chronicle have done a great job with this handsome hardcover, this 160-page coffee table book. Just like the rest of the books in this series, lays out the design and development process of this particular Pixar film in a clear and easy to follow manner. And speaking of that Chronicle book series, the copy of The Art of Disney's Pixar Elio that Amazon delivered here to the house this past Tuesday, it actually included a postcard that pushed this notion that if you bought this book, well, you really needed to also own a copy of The Art of Luca, not to mention The Art of Coco and The Art of Turning Red. Just trying to appeal to those completists out there. And since we're now talking about books, I wanted to give a shout out to Keith Buczak, who's been keeping a close watch on Ron Clements' much anticipated memoir, Making Disney Magic, From a Mermaid to Moana, Tales of a Disney Animation Director. I mentioned a few weeks back that the release date of this 496-page book from Disney Editions had slid from November to December of 2025 due to tariff-related issues. To be specific, due to uncertainty about when the container ship that held all of these books, which are being printed in China, would actually be able to make it to the States and then be offloaded and sent to stores. So, well, as Keith recently pointed out via X, Twitter, this, in spite of the recent thaw in negotiations between U.S. and China, this still remains a concern, at least as far as Disney Editions is concerned, which is why the release date of Making Disney Magic just got pushed back to January 27th, 2026. Now, mind you, I'm sure Ron's memoir will be worth reading whenever it hits store shelves. I'm just hoping that this will be the last postponement of this particular publication. And I mean, face it, animation fans went through a similar situation with J.B. Kaufman's Worlds to Conquer, the art and making of Disney's Fantasia. I want to say this book from Weldon Owens, which was supposed to continue JB's series that started with his excellent The Fairest One of All. That was his history of the making of Snow White. And then Pinocchio, the making of a Disney epic. The Worlds to Conquer was originally supposed to hit store shelves back in 2023. Well, at least according to Amazon, it's now going to finally be available for purchase on November 11th of this year. But what with tariffs tripping stuff up at the ports, well, let's just see if that actually happens. And speaking of let's take a quick break here before we continue on with the animation-related news of the week.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
And we're back. Okay. On a number of recent fine-tunings, Drew and I have talked about Anna Made. That's still a really terrible name. Anyway, this is the fundraising effort that Asifa Hollywood got underway earlier this year to help benefit, animation professionals who were impacted by the Southern California wildfires. And most recently, with the help of Sotheby's, Anna Made held an auction, 750 pieces, which were donated by various individuals and animation studios. And I'm pleased to report that effort raised nearly $500,000 for impacted families. So thanks again to those of you who placed bids on these pieces, and some of which were pretty spectacular, by the way. Aubrey Mintz, the executive director of Asifa Hollywood, released a statement in response to the money raised by this auction. Aubrey said, "I'm deeply moved by the love and generosity shown by the animation community. In times of crisis, we come together." And also, me personally, I'm intrigued by Aubrey's last name, Mintz, Mintz, which is the same spelling as the last name of Charles Mintz, who Disney history buffs will recognize as the gentleman, and I use that term loosely, who effectively poached all of Walt's animators out from under him during a contract extension negotiation on the Oswald the Lucky Rabbit short series. Now, given that we would have never gotten Mickey Mouse if it hadn't been for Charles Mintz's hardball negotiating tactics, I guess we should be grateful that this guy did what he did behind Walt's back. But even so, I'm not going to lie, I'd be kind of interested to learn if Aubrey Mintz, who, by the way, has had a very distinguished career in the field of animation and is now a professor of animation at California State University in Long Beach, just want to know if Aubrey is somehow related to Charles. Which isn't to say that even today, employees of animation studios shouldn't be wary of upper management who may not always have staffers' best interests to heart. And case in point, I wonder how many of you saw that video that bubbled up on social media this past week that showed DreamWorks executives exiting a recent work-in-progress screening of Shrek 5, only to find the hallways of that animation studio lined with members of DreamWorks' story team who were holding up signs that read in essence, "Please don't interfere with our upcoming negotiation with the union." Now, you have to remember that back in late 2003, early 2004, DreamWorks cut 4% of its staff as it began shifting from a strictly in-house production to more of a mixed production model, now relying more on third-party studios to handle the actual animation of the theatrical releases. Now, mind you, over at Nickelodeon, as yet another example of how the animation business has changed over recent years, that studio just agreed to what they're calling common sense AI protections for the voice actors working on animated series like The Patrick Star Show and Dora the Explorer. So what's going on here? Well, do you remember that opinion piece that Hank Azaria did for the New York Times back in February? The one where Hank wondered how likely it was that AI, after listening to the 30-plus years worth of episodes of The Simpsons that he's voiced for Fox, whether AI could then go off and begin voicing his characters like Moe the bartender or Chief Wiggums. And this deal with Nickelodeon will give voice actors some protections from that happening. That said, and not to be a cynic here, but this contract is strictly a provisional one, and it only runs for 3 years. And given that the financial side of animation production has gotten so tricky lately, well, let's just see if this is still an idea that Nickelodeon embraces when 2028 and 2029 rolls around. Because these days, it's all about revenue streams. I mean, it's not enough that you actually have a hit TV series, like, say, for example, Peppa Pig, that British animated series for preschoolers, which, by the way, celebrated the 20th anniversary of its launch back in May of last year, 2024. That IP didn't even get into like the theme park space till April 2011. That was when Paulton's Park in Hampshire, England, they opened Peppa Pig World. And what was fascinating is, on the back of that happening, this UK amusement park saw its annual attendance double from just 500,000 guests a year to 1 million. Which obviously caught the attention of the folks at Merlin Entertainments, a global leader in branded entertainment destinations, by the way, which is why they built the first stateside Peppa Pig park that's directly adjacent to Legoland, Florida, that opened February of 2022. And that did so well that Merlin quickly put a second Peppa Pig park in the works. This one in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, to be specific. It was built in North Richland Hills, Texas. That opened March 1st of this year, 2025. And to make sure that this IP stayed front of mind just ahead of the grand opening of this second stateside Peppa Pig park, the creators of that preschool animated series did something kind of unusual. First, in February of this year, 2025, they revealed in an episode of Season 8 of the Peppa Pig TV show that Mummy Pig was pregnant. Now, where this got interesting is that if you, as a viewer, wanted to find out if Mummy Pig were having a boy or a girl, you didn't watch the episode on the Peppa Pig Tales show on its usual channel, but rather you had to go over to Walmart.com and watch an episode of this animated series for preschoolers that had been specifically created for that retailer. Not only that, but as you were watching Baby Balloon over on Walmart.com, that was the name of the Peppa Pig Tales episode, which featured the gender reveal of Mummy Pig's new baby, you'd then see ads that told you that Walmart had all sorts of exclusive merch that then keyed off of this exclusive to Walmart.com broadcasting platform, the episode that ran there. And I have to tell you, folks, a lot of people who work in the animation space were watching this exclusive episode of Peppa Pig Tales over on Walmart.com to see how much revenue this experiment in broadcast platforming generated. Because if this gender reveal thing did as well for Walmart as that company hoped, well, don't be surprised if in the weeks and months ahead you see much bigger players in animation teaming up with retailers to do something similar. And the real irony here is Peppa Pig Tales is a show that appeals to preschoolers. But as it turns out, there's actually an emerging audience segment that comes before preschoolers, which, by the way, that audience segment is children 3 to 5. So what we're talking about now, the audience segment that comes before preschoolers, infants, which, to be specific here, we're talking about very young children up to 2 years of age. This is a segment that a number of animation players are now actively eyeballing in regards to creating films and TV shows that are specifically aimed for this audience. And I bring this up because, well, just in the past week, did you see that announcement where DreamWorks is planning on producing a Cocomelon feature for theatrical release? Now, if you're not familiar with Cocomelon, it's this children's television channel over on YouTube that started back in September of 2006 and has since gone on to become the third most subscribed and the second most viewed channel on YouTube. We're talking huge numbers, people. But Cocomelon specializes in short 3D videos of traditional nursery rhymes and original children's songs, again, aimed at the 0 to 2-year-old market. And you got to wonder, when you're dealing with an audience segment who, let's be honest, are still learning how to focus its eyes, how do you take that source material and then use it to create a full-length animated feature for theatrical release? And, all right, just to be fair here, 2 years ago, I pretty much had the same question when it came to how Warner Brothers was going to turn Minecraft into a feature-length film for theatrical release. And now that Jared Hess film, it sits at $917 million in worldwide ticket sales. So let's be clear here. What the hell do I know? DreamWorks definitely has a unique approach when it comes to the source material it's been using for features lately. I mean, for example, Dogman, which came out in January of this year, did $144 million worldwide, which is about 20% better than Captain Underpants, the first epic adventure that did back in 2017. And I also keep hearing that DreamWorks has very high hopes for Gabby's Dollhouse, the movie, which is based on that interactive series that the team behind the original Blue's Clues, they developed for Netflix back in 2021. Now, just a reminder, Gabby's Dollhouse, the movie, arrives in theaters on September 26th of this year, which, as I mentioned on previous editions of Fine Tooning, is pretty much the exact same date that DreamWorks Animation sent Wild Robot out into theaters. And that Chris Sanders film went on to earn $331 million worldwide and received several Academy Award nominations this year. So for DreamWorks to slot Gabby's Dollhouse, the movie, for pretty much this exact same spot on the release schedule suggests that they are super confident that this film, which, by the way, has a target audience of children 3 to 7 years old, is going to do very well at the box office this fall. And if that theatrical feature connects with audiences, well, who to say that a Cocomelon movie wouldn't do the same? We'll talk more about other animated features headed for theatrical release later this year in a moment. But first, this.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second LTE internet plan with smartphone plan savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Out here, there's no one way of doing things. No unwritten rules. And no shortage of adventure. Because out here, the only requirement is having fun. Bank of America invites kids 6 to 18 to golf with us. For a limited time, sign them up for a free 1-year membership, giving them access to discounted tee times at thousands of courses. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/golf with us. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America. Restrictions apply. See BofA.com/golf with us for complete details. Copyright 2025 Bank of America Corporation.
And we're back. Okay, we were just talking about DreamWorks, which has got Bad Guys 2 coming out in theaters on August 1st. Follow-up to that Animation Studios' April 2022 release, which went on to gross $250 million worldwide. DreamWorks has kept this franchise front of mind as the sequel, which went into production back in October of 2023. And they kept it front of mind by doing 2 Bad Guy holiday specials for Netflix. There was The Bad Guys, A Very Bad Holiday, which debuted on that streaming service on November 30th, 2023. And then there was The Bad Guys Haunted Heist, which bowed on Netflix on October 3rd of last year, 2024. And the latest trailer for Bad Guys 2 dropped this past week, and while it featured one too many fart jokes for my taste, it looks solid. So I'd imagine that this Bad Guys sequel will do decent business with the family audience segment when they're looking for something to watch in the latter part of this coming summer. On the other hand, the latest trailer for Smurfs dropped late last week with Friend of Mine, which is a song that Rihanna contributed to the soundtrack of this upcoming Paramount Pictures release, which arrives in theaters on July 18th of this year, 2025. Now, the trailer, it seemed fine to me. Music fans, on the other hand, attacked Friend of Mine like they wanted to kill it with fire, this dubstep song. And the world, well, here's the thing. The world has been waiting for new material from Rihanna since her 8th studio album, Anti, hit store shelves back in January of 2016. And because this new song was for a Smurf movie, members of the Rihanna Navy, by the way, that's what Rihanna's fan base calls itself, similar to Lady Gaga's Little Monsters, they acted like this song was a crime against nature. But look, given that Rihanna's a mom, she had her first son back in May of 2022 with his little brother showing up August of 2023. And by the way, Rihanna is currently pregnant with child number 3. It's not exactly a surprise that she's now making family-friendly fare. I mean, as a performer, you want to be able to show your kids what mommy and daddy does for their job. I mean, in fact, Jeffrey Katzenberg used to exploit this fact when he was working at Disney and DreamWorks. He used to make note of who in Hollywood had just had a kid, with the idea that 3 or 4 years down the line, Jeffrey would then reach out to that performer and basically say, hey, look, you've mostly made PG and R-rated movies today. Nothing you can show your kids. Why don't you come voice an animated character on one of our films? That way you'll finally have something that you can sit and watch with your family. By the way, the other part of Katzenberg's plan, because this was voice work rather than that performer appearing on screen, Jeffrey could typically procure this A-lister's services for about 1/10 of their going rate, their standard quote. Because, look, voice work is less labor intensive. You could show up for a recording session in a t-shirt and shorts. No makeup is necessary. Now, Rihanna, she signed up to voice Smurfette in Paramount's Smurf movie back in April of 2023, some 4 months before her second son was born. And another contributing factor had to be that this job was something that Rihanna could do while primarily focusing on her young family. And I got to tell you, it doesn't seem like the Rihanna Navy understands that. They're just upset that it's been nearly a decade now since this 9-time Grammy Award winner has dropped a new album. And speaking of dropping things, Paramount Pictures dropped a revised release schedule for a number of its upcoming animated releases. Paw Patrol, the Dino Movie, saw its original July 31st, 2026 release date moved up by 1 week. This third theatrical release, based on that long-running animated series, Paw Patrol, the TV show, debuted on Nick Jr. back in August of 2013. Dino Movie will now open in theaters on July 24th of next year. Now, speaking of Nick-related stuff, Nickelodeon's The Legend of Aang, The Last Airbender, which had previously been scheduled to arrive in theaters on January 30th of next year, 2026, has now had its release pushed back, nearly 9 months. The Legend of Aang will now bow at your local multiplex on October 9th of next year, 2026. Mind you, the sequel to Paramount's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, which was originally supposed to open in theaters on October 9th of next year, the spot that Legend of Aang now occupies. That sequel to to Mutant Mayhem has now seen its release date pushed back by almost a full year to September 17th, 2027. And just a reminder, in much the same way that DreamWorks, the bad guys, kept that IP front of mind thanks to those two holiday specials, Mutant Mayhem has remained in the spotlight as its sequel was being produced by Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is a 2D animated series for Paramount Plus and Nickelodeon. Now, season 1 of this show debuted back in August of last year, and the second season of Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is supposed to debut on Paramount Plus and Nickelodeon at some point later this year. And since we're now talking about animated IPs that toggle back and forth between television and the big screen, Aardman's Shaun the Sheep, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, is dropping a 7th series of shows this coming Saturday, May 24th. Not only that, but Aardman just announced that a 3rd Shaun the Sheep feature film will be arriving in theaters next year, 2026. Currently entitled The Beast of Mossy Bottom. This Shaun the Sheep film is a Halloween-inspired adventure. Its logline states that the residents of Mossy Bottom Farm are looking forward to celebrating October 31st, All Hallows Eve, until the clumsy farmer accidentally trashes the flock's pumpkin patch. Shaun turns into a mad scientist to try and fix this problem, and at that point things spiral rapidly out of control. With the farmer now missing and a wild, hairy beast now roaming the woods of Mossingham, all the ingredients are in place for this 3rd Shaun the Sheep film to be a monstrously fun family adventure. Just so you know, the script for The Beast of Mossy Bottoms was written by Mark Burton, who wrote the screenplay for Aardman's recent Netflix release, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, and this 3rd Shaun the Sheep movie will be directed by Steve Cox, who helmed that Shaun the Sheep holiday special, The Flight Before Christmas. And just in case you're wondering, Shaun the Sheep, the character, first arrived on the scene in Wallace and Gromit's A Close Shave, which took home an Academy Award for that year's Best Animated Short Film. Mind you, Aardman's production specialization is stop motion, a labor-intensive, time-consuming animation process, which, given the rise of AI in the animation space, makes one wonder how many more hand-drawn, stop-motion-based films, animation that's loaded with the human touch, we're going to see in the years ahead. I mean, for me, it's fascinating to watch just over the past few weeks as startups like Cartwheel, now that's the AI-based animation software that Jeffrey Katzenberg has been touting, and Hedra, that's the AI-driven animated video generator that's in the process of seeking its first round of funding, they were able to raise $10 million and $32 million respectively as startups. And of course, as Eric Hersey, our producer here at Fine Tooning, keeps reminding me, AI is a tool, much like a hammer. And what AI accomplish, well, it depends on the skill and the intent of the person who's actually wielding that hammer. I mean, it can be used to pound in tiny little finish nails so that we can all then enjoy a beautifully crafted piece of furniture, or it can be hurled with great force at something lovely and fragile, like a stained glass window. And I know that's a rather extreme analogy. But I have to tell you, folks, I'm old, all right? And I remember back in November of 1995 when Toy Story first arrived on the scene. And as that Pixar movie went from being just a big earner at the box office to something of a pop culture phenomenon, I remember having friends who worked in hand-drawn animation wondering aloud if they should now be worried about computer animation. Would it someday possibly put them out of a job? And I bring that up now because I've begun hearing the exact same thing from friends who work at Pixar and DreamWorks and Illuminations and Sony, how they're now looking at AI these days and wondering, is that tech someday going to put me out of a job? Look, This is an animation-related topic that Mr. Taylor and I will turn our attention to on a future fine-tuning, when Drew gets back from Florida, which will hopefully be later this week. In the meantime, if you are missing Mr. Taylor, as I am, well, you can always read his musings on the entertainment industry over on The Wrap, or if you prefer to learn more about the Mission Impossible movies, please go check out Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast that Drew co-hosts with Charles Hood. And speaking of podcasts, we have a few here at Jim Hill Media that we'd love for you to check out. There is, of course, The Mothership, Disney Dish, that I do with Len Testa. Likewise, there is the Epic Universal podcast. That's the one I do with Eric Hersey, the gentleman who produces a lot of the podcasts here at Jim Hill Media. Likewise, there is I Want That Too. That's the Disney Merch podcast I do with Eric's lovely bride, Lauren. And I really do need to do a new episode of Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn, now that Andor's completed its run and we have all that news to share out of the Star Wars celebration in Japan. Oh, also wanted to remind you about Manufacturing the Magic. That's the themed entertainment history podcast that we host here. That's produced by Noah and Shelley Valladolid. And of course, there is our Patreon project, Disney Unpacked. That's the one that Len and I do with veteran Imagineer Jim Schul. We most recently did a special podcast with Master Illusionist Chris Cox sitting in, where we talked about the recently announced Disney Abu Dhabi. And later this month, we've got a brand new episode of Unpacked coming that will take a close look at the Muppets after Disney finally acquired those characters in February of 2004. And as we close up shop here for this week, I want to ask that you do Drew and I a favor. If you could please head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this show as well as Light the Fuse. Let's see, social media wise, I want to remind you that you can keep tabs on Drew. He goes in that space as Drew Tailored, like as in a tailored shirt. And I want to say he's on X and Blue Sky and possibly Mammoth, whereas me, you can find me on Twitter, X, and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and then over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. Anyway, on behalf of Mr. Taylor, I want to thank you for listening, and the two of us will be back soon.